Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today I want to take a look at the forward line and in particular the mid-price mayhem that has arisen in that setup and that line of our sides, and rightly so. But there are quite a number of players that I'm seeing in quite a few sides, some more than others, but certainly there's a stack of players in the mid-price category that I wanted to talk about, so I thought it was worth discussing that. As I didn't get to every one of them for a player profile, I thought it might be good to discuss them. But firstly, I just wanted to also thank all the subscribers that are getting on board. There's been stacks that have come on obviously in the last few months, but in particular the last week or so, it's really skyrocketed and it's been fantastic. So much appreciated. If you're recently on board, thanks again. Hopefully you're enjoying the stuff. There's plenty of content there, really good archive of stuff if you're finalising your team. And to the guys who have been on board for a while, as always, you guys know that I'm really appreciative of your support and plenty of comments, so don't need to single that out. I always get around those comments. It's always great to see plenty there, so thanks again for the ongoing support. And yeah, this forward line, of course, the structures over the whole field seem to be the back line, plenty of rookies available, therefore let's cut a little thinner on the premiums. Of course, backline tends to be a lower scoring end also, so more rookies in that defensive half. Your midfield tends to be 5 or 6 premiums, maybe a mid-pricer, your O'Meara, your Swallow, your Beams if you call him a mid-pricer, and then round it out with rookies, even though there aren't a stack popping up. And the ruck seems to be your premium of choice with a Sanderlands or a Nankervis or something like that. And then the forward line is obviously 3 premiums and quite a few mid-prices. Certainly 2, some are even rolling 2 premiums, 3 mid-prices. There's quite a lot there, which is unusual. Often we would say steer clear of that many mid-prices, particularly in one line. But I do feel it's fair enough in this season because there are quite a few fantastic selections, and also there aren't a lot of options in the forward line that we can bank on. And just a bit of a theory, I mean, picking our SuperCoach sides is a bit like putting together a jigsaw puzzle when you think about it. When you start with your jigsaw, you try and put in the positions and the pieces that you know are going to be in the right spot come the end and the final piece. And picking our SuperCoach side is very similar. We look at each line, and in essence you want to pick the guys that, as we always say, are going to be top 6 or 8 or 10 in their line. Obviously top 6 defenders and forwards, top 10 mids can be a general guide. And of course we pick them in the hope that they can just be the real lock in our jigsaw, and we can just pick them and they can stay throughout the season, and very nice. And what we do in the rest of the year is try and figure out who are the actual top picks and work in the rest of the jigsaw. And interestingly, with the forward line, we don't have too many pieces of the forward line puzzle that we can say are definite top 6 forwards. So I think that's why we're seeing a lot of mid-prices, because there's a bit of uncertainty about who the main guys will be. We all agree on Dalhouse. I think most of us are on board McRae. I think Rewalt, although expensive, I think most of us can bank on him. But there isn't a stack. I've probably left out maybe a name or 2, but there isn't a stack of guys that you go, yeah, definitely going to average 95 plus easily. There's not too many of those. So I think this mid-price has been given us a license, I suppose, to take a risk on a mid-pricer with the uncertainty around these key pieces of our forward line puzzle. And as the season goes on, we'll rearrange those pieces, we'll take a look at what's on the table, and we'll find out where everything does fit into the jigsaw. But for now, we've really got to just try and see what's available, and I guess that lack of absolute bankable premiums also gives a bit more of a likelihood that a mid-pricer can jump up and be a lock-in top 6 to 8 forward. So it's twofold. Definitely the lack of premium options, or at least bankable ones, is giving us a bit of a free rein to take a bit of a risk in the hope that they can bump up to top 6 status, which in the past has been, I guess, unlikely. Often mid-prices are there to give you a bit of good points, but also mainly cash. But there's certainly a few options that are very good chances to finish very high in the final forward stats. So of course, I'll get stuck into them. Got a few names, of course. As always, some I'll talk about more than others, but I mean, just going down the list, I mean, we'll probably start around the 430k, and look, Took Miller, we won't really spend too much time on him. I think a few people were considering him maybe early in the piece, but he seems to have dropped off the radar, hasn't done too much over the last month or so doesn't seem to be overly popular at 428k, but was at some stage. But Shaun Higgins is definitely a man who is very popular at 426k, and who would have thought? No one would have ever thought that Shaun Higgins would once again be relevant in SuperCoach. And not even just relevant, but have people actually picking him, because I think we get a lot of tempters, but when push comes to shove, we just don't go with him. But Higgins is putting together a fantastic case. North Melbourne, they've lost a lot of experience. I think Higgins will take on a lot of responsibility playing through the midfield as well. They'll have a pretty youthful engine room, and I think Higgins will provide not only that class on the outside, but he's also proving through the JLT. His stats will reflect that his inside possessions are also on the rise. So I think we could definitely see a 95 plus average from him. But as is always a question with Higgins, it's not so much his scoring, but how many games he can produce consistently and in a row. So I think Higgins, if you're going with him, which he does seem to be getting more popular by the day, can't blame you. But who would have thought, hey, he seemed to be blacklisted some time ago. But I do feel like his numbers will be very impressive, because North Melbourne need a player like him, and he will get plenty of opportunity and extra responsibility in the main part of the field, of course, at the centre bounces and things like that. And he's such a silky player. Fingers crossed for all owners out there that he doesn't go down early, because it'd be pretty brutal if he does. Leaves you that real awkward sort of setup. But look, he's at 426k, bit on the more expensive side of a mid-pricer, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does jump up to be a top 6 to 8 forward. But personally, I'm not going with him. I just feel like it's too risky injury-wise, and I've already gone a couple of injury-risky type players. Paddy Ryder, I've covered off on him a fair bit. You can check out my player profile on him. You can also check him out in the SuperCoach traps, so I guess that probably sums it up for me. I do feel like he is a trap. I don't quite see him producing the goods on a consistent basis. I'll run through all these in the other videos that I just mentioned, so for more in-depth, go to the player profile, and more precisely the SuperCoach traps that I did just the other day. But I guess, in short, I just don't feel like he has shown enough of a sample of good points in recent time. Of course, he missed last season, which is a flag in itself. But the fact that he's only played the one season at Port Adelaide, it didn't work. He didn't tie in well with Lobie. Maybe Lobie doesn't play. Maybe that might help his cause. But the fact that he's returning after such a lack of time, not playing at all last season, really concerns me. And maybe it's just a personal preference, but I'm really not going with any of those guys who haven't played for a year, because when you pick a guy at that sort of price, when we got a Nankervis as well, I think it's a far better option. If you are looking for that forward ruck swing, I think Nankervis has really put Ryder's relevancy to bed. As far as I'm concerned, Ryder is in about 15% of sides, so he's still relatively popular. But it's a no from me. Jack Billings at 407k, midfield forward, of course. Certainly a guy who could definitely explode. And look, Jack Steele as well, 347k. I might talk about them both, because the two Jacks from St Kilda are often tied into the same sentence. But firstly on Billings, I might even compare them. Billings and Steele, they're different types of players. Billings is more your match winner, dynamic player on the outside, capable of kicking goals, where Steele will just produce your boring but delicious numbers. Your big tackles, your contested possessions. He wins it on the inside. Quite simply, Steele is the man who will get it out to Billings more often than not. That's not to say Billings can't win a hard ball, but he is more your outside damaging player if he really is going on his strengths. That's certainly it. I think Billings at 407k, it's really hard to get a gauge on him. He's your classic mid-price option of a young guy that I think we all agree will be a star, but the question is when, and also what defines a star. We've seen players have fantastic seasons for their own clubs, but not always does that mean they're absolute locks in SuperCoach. I think Billings will have a very good season, Do I see him bursting up to the elite bracket, SuperCoach wise? Probably not. Probably just off. I just feel as if maybe he's a guy who can be shut down a little more easy, and I do think while he is playing great footy through the midfield, there are still a lot of quality Saints mids that he's slightly behind. So unless he can really break into that and be a real regular centre bounce attendee and not get caught on the half-forward flank too much, that would be my only concern. But he's a talented footballer and is very smart footballer and finds the ball with ease. So look, if I'm predicting averages, I'd probably say in the low 90s, maybe around your anywhere from maybe 91 to 94. And look, that might, if you're a bit more confident, that might be enough for you, because obviously we're a bit slim on absolute bankable options. But I don't feel like he's a great selection, because at 407k, we really need him to jump up to a lock status and a long-term selection. And he's not going to make you enough money to be a cash cow. Of course, he's at 407,000. So he really needs to be a top 6 forward. And I'm not sold enough on that he will be. So for me, it's a no. On to Steele. Look, I'm really tempted by Steele. And if you go with him, I don't blame you at all. He's honestly not on my side at the moment, just because I'm a little concerned. It's a massive jump he'd have to take. You know, he hasn't played that much footy. He hasn't really shown any real signs of scoring ability previously, at least not at the top level. I know we all love that he is an inside mid, will fill that role at the Saints and play it extremely well. Tackles hard, we know that for sure. But it's a massive jump up for him to go from a guy who has been on the fringe of the Giants, struggling for games, finds himself in Saints colours, to go in such an inexperienced career to just boom to a top 6 forward is a massive jump. Now, I know some of his numbers through the JLT were extremely impressive and got a lot of people's ears pricked up for sure. And as I said, I wouldn't blame you if you go with him. I wouldn't argue the case that I don't think it's a great selection. Again, if I'm predicting averages, I really can't say exact. I mean, he's really going a serious range. I mean, I think he's capable of around 95 and maybe a touch over. But I also feel he's definitely capable of around 85. It just depends with young players how he can find the consistency from week to week in an AFL home and away season. I know he's pretty much advanced on a lot of other guys his own age and things like that in his experience. He's done a pretty good apprenticeship, but you know, it wouldn't surprise me for averages around the 90 and beyond, but I just feel like there is a genuine risk. As I said with Billings, you know, there's a lot of good midfielders in the Saints lineup at the moment. You know, you've got Ross, you've got Armitage, you've got Stephen. There's a lot in there. So it's not like he's filling a void like a Tom Mitchell or an O'Meara or something like that, where they're going to walk into their new club and be the main man. I think Steele will be part of a rotation and he'll play it well. He'll certainly thrive in the stoppage. But there is a genuine chance that he will throw in the odd lower score and things like that. So I'm going to pass on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does turn out to be a very good selection. At 347k, it's awkward, and I just feel as if I don't have enough confidence in him to put that sort of money out in a guy that has a little bit of risk attached as far as I'm concerned, and still has a massive jump in his own career to reach the heights that we need him to. But, you know, he's popular, and I can't blame him. As I said, I think there's certainly merit, and you could argue a very good case that he is a good selection. So I certainly see both sides of the coin there. He just hasn't squeezed into my side, that's all. Christian Petracca, 395k, absolute bull, absolute beast. Love him as a player, love watching him. I don't think I can select him though. I really do feel like in the coming seasons, maybe as early as 2018, he will be a great selection in SuperCoach. But the main reason I'm saying no to Petracca is I think we saw a sample size of what we'll get in the home and away season through the JLT. You know, Melbourne had a great win over, I think it was Carlton. He kicked 4, he was all over it, looked great, scored big points. But then the next week, his next match, you know, struggled to get into it. 15 touches, wasn't fantastic. I think he'll be at the mercy a little bit of how Melbourne go, just because he will play a little bit more forward. I can sort of compare him to that Isaac Heaney sort of role. He's playing your dynamic half-forward role and playing it very well. And he's also bound for midfield time at some point. But I think he's got to just come into that pecking order a little bit higher in coming years. Melbourne still have a fantastic midfield. You've got Lewis, you've got Jones, you've got the young brigade of, Viney and Oliver and Brayshaw, and, I'm probably missing a couple there as well. That's just off the top of my head. But I think Petracca is probably going to spend more time up forward because he does play the role quite well rather than in the midfield. If Petracca showed signs of pure mid, he'd be in my team because I think he's definitely got the capability of scoring big, but he just hasn't shown it at this stage, and I think we'll see a fluctuation in his scores throughout the season, and it's just too risky because he's not cheap. He's a touch under 400. We need to be far more sold on him than what we are at the moment to be spending that sort of cash. Toby McLean, 381k. Now, I've been reading a few articles of people revealing their teams at the moment, and he's in a few. I didn't check his ownership, and I'm not sure how popular he is, but certainly seems to be a bit of buzz in some forums or some team reveals on certain pages that see him as a good selection. And if someone could enlighten me as to why, I'd be really happy. I don't see personally how he's relevant. I really don't. I've watched him play a lot. I really have. I've seen him play. He's a very crafty player, very smart user of the ball, and seems to find himself into some good spots. And I've heard people comment how he did have a good final series. He did. He was one of those players, like many dogs, who played beyond what we thought they were capable of and rode that wave of momentum fantastically. But I don't think I see him doing it over the course of a season. Now, at 380k, he needs to be a top 8 forward minimum. He needs to bump his average up significantly, and I just don't see him getting the opportunity. As far as I'm concerned, he's still your half-forward flank, doing a bit of forward pressure at the Dogs. Their midfield bats as deep as anyone. The reigning premiers may not have as many superstars in there aside from Bont, but the likes of Libba, Dalhouse, McRae, Hunter, Caleb Daniel rolls through there a little bit. There is stacks in there, and again, I would have probably left out a couple of key doggy midfielders there, but I was really surprised to read a couple that really was sold on him. Unless I'm missing anything, I know he might get a little bit more opportunity, and I know he's shown signs and snippets in games and certain periods of the season, but I can't see him putting together through the whole season. So feel free to enlighten me if you're on the McLean bandwagon and I'm missing something. But as far as I'm concerned, at 380k, he really sits in the most awkward of situations, and I haven't seen the body of work to get it all excited about him, but I thought it'd be worth putting him on the list because he has been in a few signs that I've seen. But moving on to Jarryd Roughead, and I'll be far more positive about this one, of course. At 367k, he'll be one of the more popular players in the competition, and rightly so. I'm certainly on board Ruffy. Now, I know he also missed last year, but for different circumstances to the Bombers, of course. It's great to see him back in full health and enjoying his footy. That's fantastic. It's also fantastic that he looks like he's playing some great footy too, because I was unsure how his footy would be, but he has come back extremely well. So yes, I'm a little bit wary that he's missed so much footy, and how will his body hold up? I'm certainly wary of that, but I think Roughead, who's got the runs on the board, he's averaged 95 and beyond many times. He's certainly got the runs on the board, and I think it's hard to go past him. Even if he was playing key forward, I reckon it'd be tough to go past Ruffy, but the fact that he's moving up the ground and seeing himself around a few stoppages just is the selling point as far as I'm concerned. I think in just about every JLT game, had a couple of clearances and even centre clearances. Clarko really enjoying to throw him into the middle. So I think as a few of those experienced Hawks have left and gone out of the side, I think Ruffy, being an experienced body and a very big man who's capable of doing those sort of things. He's fantastic below his knees and a very mobile big fella. So I think he works into that sort of midfield setup quite nicely and floating forward. So I see him playing quite a mobile role throughout the season, which is so appealing, and he's looking great through the JLT as well. I just wanted to get a bit of reassurance in the JLT that he was looking fit and firing and looking great like they were saying, and he was. So certainly a great chance for Ruffy to be a top 6 mid. He's shown, or top 6 forward I should say, he's shown he can in the past, so there's no reason why he couldn't go there again, particularly with probably the most SuperCoach friendly role he's ever had in his career. So I'm certainly on board him. Represents a bit of value as well as potential keeper status. So it's great to see. Toby Nankervis, of course, I don't really have to say too much about him. Everyone's on board him at the moment. I think when I first started looking at him, he was in about 11% of sides. I think he's about up to 30% now. So, of course, with Sandilands and Nankervis equally having fantastic JLTs, they complement each other very nicely. If Sandy, of course, in the ruck, you have Nankervis up forward. It's a match made in heaven for your insurance, that's for sure. If Sandy goes down, then Nankervis, who is looking extremely good, is a fantastic swap to the ruck to give you a bit of coverage. I've done a player profile on Nankervis, so feel free to go check that one out. You won't have to scroll too far. He's pretty much just a few videos back, I think, so not too far ago. But look, he's a very, very appealing selection. Looks to have the number one ruck position at Richmond sewn up, which is music to our ears. I was a little bit concerned that at one point he might share it, but it looks like it's got him all over him. His hands are right around it, so I think he's a big man who is capable of getting his knees dirty, contested possession, loves a tackle. His stats in all form of the game have shown that, even last year in Swans colours. And look, he hasn't played too many games, but it's not uncommon to see ruckmen do a genuine apprenticeship without many games, but they're physically ready, and then once given the opportunity, can acquit themselves quite well. And I think we will see that. I'm probably not going to go outrageous and say he can average around 95. That's not beyond him, but I think we'd be all happy with around the 90. And I think that's probably the most realistic, is probably low 90s. But if he really gets going, he's got all the ingredients to be a high 90s scorer. That's if everything clicked. Now, he can kick a goal, can take a mark, a real Shane Mumford type, a real bullocking ruckman. You know, he's probably a reasonable tap ruckman. In fact, he had a fantastic hit-out to advantage ratio last year, albeit from a lot less hit-outs than a lot of your week-to-week ruckmen. But nonetheless, I think we'll see a lot of his points from your in and under, your tackling, you're working it out to his fellow mids, and just harassing at the contest. So I think he's a fantastic selection. Hard to go past him. You know, the kicker is that he provides insurance for Sandy. Had a great JLT. Going to be hard to say no to Nank, that's for sure. Nathan Roughead I'll round out with. Now, I've seen him talked about quite a bit. I've seen him in probably less teams than maybe a month or so ago. He's at 301k, and he's just a no for me as far as I'm concerned. I know he's had a pretty good JLT, and there'll be a role for him at North Melbourne, but I see that role as more your half-forward flank and burst player through the midfield. And I've seen him play a bit of VFL at the Dogs, and he's that player who's just too good for VFL and is ready to play AFL level. But I don't see great scoring potential consistently. I think he'll play a role in a North Melbourne side that will struggle a bit, and a role that he might be hindered by a poor team at times. So certainly capable of winning his own ball, but I do see him as more that player who can go forward, kick a goal, rove a few packs, and also feature through the midfield using his pace on the outside. But I couldn't see him really having too much relevancy in SuperCoach. Now, of course, at 300k on the lower end of your mid-price, can make you some coin, that's for sure, but I've reeled off a lot of options today, and I think there's a lot more that are far more appealing than Roughead. Yes, he's probably the cheapest, which gives him a bit more scope to earn cash, but I'd rather just pay an extra 60k and get my hands on a Roughy or an Nankervis, or an extra 40 and get my hands on Steele or something like that. So Roughead, seen him in a couple, listening to a podcast the other day, he was in there. I'm advising against him quite strongly. I don't think he ticks either box at his keeper or generating enough cash, and I'm not really sold on him being a consistent scorer. I think we'll see a fluctuation from, you know, he might have your 110 occasionally, but I think more often than not we'll see him throw in a 50 and a 75-80, and I'll probably see him averaging around probably somewhere in your high 70s, low 80s if he really adapts well, and maybe North have a better year, but you know, that's just all my opinion. So look, we've rolled through quite a few mid-prices there, and it is mayhem, but it's warranted mayhem in the forward line at the moment. Certainly justified for a lot of those selections. We'll see quite a few. Some of you might have two of them. some of you might have 4 of them, you know. I think like Higgins, Roughead, Nankervis will be extremely popular. Wouldn't be surprised to see a Steele or Billings in a lot of teams as well. So there'll be a lot of them. Some of them will burn us and we'll look back and go, gee, why did we not think of this? But some of them will be gem picks. The question and the challenge for us is of what? That list of about 8 or 9 or 10, whatever it is on my paper there that I just listed off, which one of them will elevate their games big time in 2017 and which will plateau, which will drop off, which JLT series have been a bit of a, you know, disguise for what we're really going to see. It'll be very interesting to find out, but that's why we do the research, that's why we talk about it, that's why we discuss it and delve into the stats in every section we can. So hopefully we can get the right selection, and hopefully this video has helped you a little bit, or at least provoked a little bit of discussion. Of course, they're just my opinions. You're not always going to agree with them. I understand that. But above all, I hope most of my videos, at the very least, get you thinking, because I listen to podcasts as well, and by no means do I agree with everything that they say, but they certainly get you thinking, change your view, make you check the other side of the coin and give us 2 angles of it. So it's always good from that point of view as well. So thanks for tuning in, guys, as always. Really appreciate it. We're not far away now. I'll have my team on show probably Thursday. Might do a video or 2 in the more informative section. Maybe if I get the chance. I probably don't have too many other areas that I want to cover. I'm pretty happy we've got the rookies. We've looked at most of the ground. So I think I'm pretty happy there. There's plenty of player profiles to get your hands around. So certainly I think it's a good archive. If you've got any questions, you can generally find it, whether it's in the club previews, the player profile, or when I look at certain sections of the ground. So thanks for tuning in once more. Comment any of your thoughts, any questions you've got. Give the video a like, of course. Always great to see a few thumbs ups there. Subscribers, keep coming. Fantastic. Hit 650, hopefully before pre-season, or round 1, I should say. That was my goal, about 650. Well, my goal was actually 620 about a week ago. When I did this goal 2 months ago, it was 650, but I had to sort of readjust. But all of a sudden, they've come in their trove. So I've had to readjust that back to the original of 650, which I thought was ambitious, but it's been really good. So really pleased with that. But yeah, stay tuned. I'll look to get to all your questions and comments prior to round 1, because of course they're very time sensitive. So hopefully I can get to those before, you know, round 1. So I'll do my best there. But thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll stop talking. I'll grab myself a water and maybe sit down with a Milo and watch a bit of AFL 360. So should be a good night. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll catch you later.